The Secrets of Star Trek is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek episode 162.
Captain to bridge.
Spock here.
Make it so. Surrender is not an option.
Attention crew of the Enterprise, this is James Kirk.
We are all explorers, driven to know what's over the horizon, what's beyond our own shores.
We would have helped you get home if you had asked. That's who Starfleet is.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're concluding our discussion of Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. And joining me today on the panel is Jimmy Akin. We now pick up the discussion where we left off last time. So then we have the assassination of Gorkon while Kirk is asleep. A cloaked vessel shoots the Klingon ship from right beneath the Enterprise, so close that it looks like the Enterprise shoots it.
This is a mistake because a ship moving in 3 dimensions is going to have cameras above it and below it, and they should see the photon torpedoes coming out of nowhere.
Yeah, right. And scanners should be scanning and see where they originate from. But that disables the Klingon ship, which allows a couple of Enterprise crewmen who are in on the conspiracy to beam over and using gravity boots, which apparently are very rare in a spaceship in the 23rd century.
Really? You'd think they'd have lots of them.
Yes.
and also they're called alternately magnetic boots and gravity boots.
Yeah.
So apparently they're boots that are meant to simulate gravity but don't actually manipulate gravity. They're just magnetic.
Yeah. They go over, they shoot Gorkon while all the Klingons are floating in zero G.
And I love the Klingon blood,
yes,
which is magenta in color.
Establishes Klingon blood as being magenta here, but they kind of leave that behind it in later series.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I like the Klingon blood blobs, and there's a nice moment after the assassins have beamed out, and we get this shot of zero G on the Klingon ship with bodies just kind of slowly rotating and blobs of blood in the air slowly merging and spinning, and it's an eerie moment that I think is very effective.
Yes, yeah. So Kirk and McCoy beam over to do what they can, but because apparently Klingons don't have doctors.
Well, no, they said they did until this happened. So apparently the doctor was one of the ones killed during the assault. Because they didn't just kill Gorkon, they killed quite a number of people.
That's true. Okay, so, and I mean, I get that Klingons wouldn't have like a whole medical staff because they consider, illness as a weakness and that sort of stuff. But yeah, okay, so McCoy and Kirk beam over, then they were arrested. For some reason, they leap to the conclusion.
Well, I want to comment on, though, McCoy really tries to save Gorkon, and he gets this goes beyond what we normally see. Normally McCoy will shoot someone with his hypo spray, which he does here, but he doesn't hop up on top of the person on a table and start trying to administer CPR to them.
Right.
And it really is effective, and this is played like I don't think we even have music at this point. It's just allowing us to focus on McCoy's effort to save Gorkon. And he's narrating us through it, talking about how Gorkon is not responding as he ratchets up his efforts to save him. The thing that's implausible about this is he says he doesn't have knowledge of his anatomy. And no, you should, as someone who encounters Klingons, you should have a basic knowledge of the anatomy of the principal rivals of the Federation, because you're likely to be in situations where you may need to care for a fallen Klingon or Romulan, and it may be urgent that you do so, just like right now.
Well, after the trouble with tribbles, you'd think McCoy would have done a little studying up on Klingon physiology, right?
Yeah.
He had a mole in the... Yeah, that it wasn't all that plausible.
But I still really like the performance
yes.
of that DeForest Kelley gives here.
And in fact, McCoy is even as he's being arrested, he just like he's all out of sorts because he couldn't save him, and he's like, "What's going on?" Like I couldn't save him. I couldn't, and I liked that performance. It was really good, really on the mark. So they're arrested. There's a whole thing about the Klingon High Council warns the Federation not to interfere with this trial that they're going to put for Kirk and McCoy. If you want any kind of peace opportunity, then don't interfere with this. Don't try to rescue them. And then we have the trial, which is interesting. We have John Schuck as the... Oh, I forgot to mention, John Schuck shows up again as a Klingon, the Klingon ambassador to the Federation.
He was also a Drawl he was one of the Drawls on Babylon 5.
Okay.
We also have another Babylon 5 alumnus. On Rura Penthe, the prison master is... I'm blanking on his name all of a sudden.
Morgan Shepard.
G. Morgan Shepard.
Yep.
Who is the Soul Hunter on Babylon 5, and also the old Canton F. Delaware on Doctor Who.
That's right. Yeah. He's just such a great voice. He's got to be in there. Yeah.
There are only so many talented actors who are willing to wear that much latex, and so they show up in everything.
That's right. Right. Valeris continues to manipulate Spock and the rest of the crew. Starts talking about sabotage in order to get them from
keep them
they've been
from
ordered
just going back to Federation HQ.
Right. She brings up the Sebo, the workers throwing their Sebo into the works. Was that a real thing or is that an urban legend?
I think
Dutch workers. Okay. But that's the origin of the term sabotage. We get Kurtwood Smith playing the Federation president. If you have ever watched that 70s show, that's Red. So just an actor you might recognize, but under all the makeup, it's hard to see him.
I wanted to comment on the trial scene.
Yes.
So the trial scene, we've got Michael Dorn as Colonel Worf, apparently an ancestor of our Worf, and that's nice to see. The trial is not really that believable. Yes, it's a Klingon trial, but even then, it's not really believable.
Mm-hmm.
You have Chang and Worf making motions, and the judge sustaining or overruling them. And they're like just playing this for dramatic effect. They're like there's not really consequences to that motion just got overruled or that remark just got stricken. They just blunder ahead in the trial anyway. It's sort of like dialogue tinsel being put up around what's really happening in this scene, even though it doesn't. They're not really taking the objections or the sustainings and the overruling seriously as they would in a realistic drama. But I like how the judge has this iron gauntlet with a ball that he uses as a gavel, and when he bangs it, it sparks.
Yep.
That's cool. I like there's a moment where they play the tape, which we in hindsight realize Valeris had been recording from outside Captain Kirk's door, where he talks about how he can't trust Klingons because of the death of my boy, and Chang demands of Kirk, "Did you say that?" And Kirk says the line for William Shatner is, "Those words were spoken by me," which is a great use of the passive voice to distance himself from those words. Instead of forthrightly acknowledging it and saying, "Yes, I said that," which is active voice. It's passive voice. Those words were spoken by me. I love how that distances him from it. Also, there's an interesting moment. They play this scene with initially the Klingon speaking in Klingon, but then Kirk and McCoy have these translators up to their ears, little devices, basically iPhones, I guess.
Yeah.
And then there's this Hunt for Red October-like moment where all of a sudden we pivot to the Klingon becomes English.
Right. So,
which is exactly what happens in Hunt for Red October. We hear the Russians speaking in Russian, and then all of a sudden, actually on the word Armageddon, we pivot and the Russian becomes English.
Right.
And so we see the rest of the scene played out in English, but Kirk and McCoy continue to hold the translators up to their ears to show that that really all this dialogue is in Klingon.
Yeah.
And there's a great moment which is actually based on a famous moment in American history where Adlai Stevens is talking. Is it in the United Nations? But where originally Adlai Stevens was like, "Answer me now! Don't wait for the translation."
Yes.
And Chang does that to Kirk.
Right.
Which would imply that Kirk can understand Klingon if he doesn't need to wait for the translation.
Right. That was a good moment. The other thing about the trial is how it attacks, like, first, it attacks McCoy at his core. It questions his medical ability. It questions his medical ethics. And, McCoy has always been the great doctor on the Enterprise who can handle anything. And here he's being, like, accused of being either incompetent or in collusion. And, if you're not in collusion, then you're an incompetent doctor.
Mm-hmm.
So I like that. Chang also gives that line where he says captains are responsible for the actions of their crew. So Kirk, if you didn't cross over yourself, you're still responsible. So there's that. Yeah, no, we had that dispute in a previous episode. So they are, in the end, they're convicted and sent off to Rurapente.
Gulag Rurapente. Notice that it's called a gulag at one point. Gulags were Soviet prison camps.
Often in Siberia where it was cold and snowy and deadly to leave, like Rurapente.
Just like Rurapente, yeah. And Rurapente is kind of interesting because once they get down into the dilithium mines, we have this collection of aliens, and it's vaguely reminiscent of the cantina scene in Star Wars. In A New Hope, only with a lot more fighting. It
actually reminds me a lot of in Guardians of the Galaxy, the first one, when that crew was sent to a prison and they were surrounded by aliens. And I wonder if there's a bit of an homage from that to this scene.
Yeah, although from sure I can see that given the timeline, Guardians may have been referencing this, but this I think is referencing the cantina.
Yeah,
because
probably.
we haven't had a lot of aliens interacting other than sitting around listening to a briefing on Star Trek.
There's a moment before they descend in where the camp commander, again played by G. Morgan Shepard, comes out and gives them a speech about how there's no escape, and it's very reminiscent in this case of the Bridge over the River Kwai. There's a scene like that in that movie, so it's very evocative of that. They meet a shapeshifter in the prison named Marcia, played by the actress Iman, who was a model, I think, before she
was a model.
Yeah, before she got into acting.
And she's also a camelid shapeshifter who, after kissing Kirk, becomes a horrible monster, leading to some humor. And then eventually, she's going to lead Kirk and McCoy out so they can be killed while attempting to escape.
Yeah.
And she says she's going to be given a full pardon. But weirdly, she turns into Kirk, and they fist fight. And we have a great moment where the real Kirk says, "I can't believe I kissed you," and her as Kirk says, "Must have been your lifelong ambition," which is a great meta reference to the fact that people have criticized Bill Shatner for being too self-involved and loving himself too much and it being too egotistical. And so I just think it's a tribute to William Shatner that he's willing to
deliver that
poke
line.
fun at himself and deliver that line with such gusto.
Yeah, I did like that. There is actually another moment just for that where Marcia climbs into Kirk's bed, in the middle of the night in the barracks, and McCoy is like unbelieving. What is it with you?
Another hanging a lantern on it.
Yeah, that was good. It was good. Then back on Enterprise, they're searching for the gravity boots because, Lord knows there's only one set of gravity boots that are possibly on the ship.
Well, two.
Yeah, right, 2 sets. Spock explains why the boots must be somewhere on the ship, which is, I appreciate it because I said, well, why wouldn't you just get rid of it? So they know fans are going to ask. And so like, okay, you can't throw them out in the trash. You can't, because
everybody would see it float by. It's just like those photon torpedoes that appeared out of nowhere underneath us.
That's true. You can't vaporize them with a phaser because it sets off the alarms. Although Valeris, why are you shooting tonight's dinner? Like,
Well,
yeah.
for demo purposes, but I like how they have not many kitchens are fully equipped with a gun cabinet.
This is a warship, right?
Yeah. Also, the apparently, and they're inconsistent about this because this can't fire on a ship rule without it setting off alarms is only here.
Yes.
They forget about this even before the end of the movie. They forget about this where the assassins have been killed with phasers on stun. So apparently they've already started to walk it back. And originally it was you can't fire an unauthorized phaser on a ship and without setting off an alarm. Now you can as long as it's on stun.
Right. We get another cameo. This time Christian Slater shows up as an officer on the Excelsior who wakes up Sulu. Christian Slater's a big Trekkie, and his mom was the casting director, and just put two and two together, and that's how he ended up on Star Trek. They searched. There's a whole montage of them searching the Enterprise, which was kind of cool. I like they're turning out every door, every drawer, and they're going through everything. That was pretty good.
By the way, the gravity boots thing could have been fixed with dialogue. They should have just said, "Look, they were in the Klingon ship. There was blood all over the place." That was floating. Some of it was bound to get on the gravity boots.
Yeah.
Or their uniforms. We should search for both gravity boots and uniforms that have Klingon blood on them.
Right.
Or we should just search for Klingon blood. And that'll lead us to the evidence.
Right. There's a crewman that the boots are in his cabinet and they just assume they must be his.
Oh, well, Chekhov gets to play a comic character. I'm sure you have heard Russian Epic of Cinderella. If shoe fits, wear it. And the guy has these weird amphibian feet that couldn't possibly go in the human gravity boot.
This predates the O.J. Simpson trial, so that can't be a Simpson reference. Yeah, I was just thinking of that O.J. Simpson. If the glove fits, you must convict her.
If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
You must acquit.
Yeah, if you let the accused spread his hand out to the widest possible extent as he puts on the glove and then not yank it down, and he's wearing a latex glove underneath it.
Right, sure. Yeah, it doesn't fit. Anyway, I note that the crewman's name was Dax, which predates Jedzia Dax, of course. There's a moment where they have to, the Enterprise crew have to talk to a Klingon listening post as they cross the border, and they're having to look through literal books to translate Klingon. Okay, so they tell us why they tell us why they can't use the Universal Translator, but
they
nobody
just say
on board
they can't. They say it would be recognized.
Sure, but Klingons. There's no Klingon speakers on board. Uhura doesn't speak Klingon. They can't just use the computer like Google Translate?
Yeah, that's so Uhura, so Nichelle Nichols argued against this scene, saying Uhura should have a basic knowledge of Klingon, and she should.
Yeah.
Or their computers should be so good in the future that it's irrelevant, in which case you don't need her to actually speak in Klingon.
Right.
But even if this is really a limitation of the time where they aren't thinking, the computer should just be giving us an on-screen translation of what the Klingons are saying. We don't need to look up it in a massive Klingon phrase book.
Right.
And then I type in or say quickly what I want, and it translates that for me, and then I read it back.
Right.
This is being filmed in 1990, 91. They're not thinking that far ahead about how this kind of situation would really work. So I can kind of give that to them. And the scene plays for comedy where Uhura is saying, "We am thy ship so-and-so en route to this place. We am carrying things and stuff." She should have said, we am going to Bizarro World." But and the Klingon guys at the outpost let her pass and basically laugh it off, and they're boozing it up.
Yes.
So they're
terrible at their job.
That's the real reason they're getting across is the guards are getting drunk and aren't really being guards.
Right. So we get the revelation of Valeris as co-conspirator in this grand conspiracy, and Spock forces a mind meld on her, which is a big deal.
This is mind rape.
Yeah.
It is played as if it's rape. And it is the coldest scene in the moment. It is in the movie. It is incredibly compelling. When Valeris refuses to give the names of the co-conspirators. Kirk just turns to Spock and signals him to go ahead, and Spock forces a mind meld on Valeris. He grabs her by the back of her head, and she even tries to back up from him, and he yanks her closer to him.
Yep.
He puts his other hand on her face and skips all of the my mind to your mind stuff. He's not gently easing into this. He just goes into her mind, and they both start naming the conspirators together. And then and Kirk keeps saying, who else, and they go through the conspirators, and then they ask, where is the peace conference, because they don't know how to get there at this point. And Spock so forcefully deals with Valeris's mind that she is moaning and crying in pain.
Yep.
Before Spock says she doesn't know. And you watch the reaction shots, and in particular watch Nichelle Nichols' reaction shot to this, and it's like, this is played, it's on the subtext level, this is a rape. This is a mental rape.
Right. It's at least torture, but mental rape as a torture device. And I'm uncomfortable with this, the ends justifying the means here of what they're doing. So yeah, that was hard to watch, and it brings the question: how far is Spock willing to go for peace? And apparently
very far. And in this case, he's also willing to do it this way and so brutally because he is furious with her.
Yeah.
He wanted her to be his successor, and now she is a traitor.
Right.
And he is just furious with her. And this leads to another scene where he's back in his quarters, filled with self-doubt as a result of all of her betrayal, and Kirk has to come back and kind of buck him up.
Right. Then we get to, and they have to eventually get the location of the peace conference from Sulu in the Excelsior. And
by the way, I haven't talked much about Sulu. Notice he's been promoted to captain and is not on the Enterprise. He's like the only guy to get out of the hometown.
Yes.
Everybody else may go up in rank, but they're still on the Enterprise.
Yeah.
And even Spock is Captain Spock. He's still on the Enterprise. And it's like, how many captains does one ship have? But Sulu, at least, man, you got out of this crummy town. You made something of yourself. You got to go elsewhere.
Well, this is the same thing that TNG had a problem with. Like nobody was ever promoted out of the Enterprise in TNG either. I mean, they made that a whole episode with Riker trying to get his own ship.
More than once.
Yeah. So, and they call it Camp Kittimer, which I think is a clear reference to Camp David.
Kittimer. Yeah, Camp David. Yeah,
right.
Camp David being the famous presidential retreat where diplomatic negotiations often take place.
Right. There was the Camp David Accords that brought peace between Egypt and Israel back in the Carter administration. 70s. Yeah. So when they get there, Chang is attacking the Enterprise, trying to prevent them from stopping the assassination of the Federation president. McCoy and Spock make a special homing torpedo that can home in on a...
And this is ridiculous,
yeah.
But I mean, okay, they should have the engineers do that. It's their job.
Right.
They're the ones who are trained, not the medical doctor and the science officer.
Yes, but we have to have them... Yeah, I mean, at least you have Scotty doing it, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if anything, it should be Scotty assisted by Spock, not Spock assisted by McCoy.
Right. The whole thing was that the Klingon bird of prey was this new, it could fire while cloaked, and therefore it was even more dangerous. But it was a prototype, so don't worry, we don't have to incorporate it into any other Star Trek after this.
Well, even if they do, it's fine. It's just, I mean, one of the things that has been sort of pointed out that's sort of fanon, but sort of, I think, actual on-screen canon, is because they even talk about this in the original series, is there is an arms race going on between cloaking technology and the ability to defeat it. Just like today, there is an arms race between stealth technology and the ability to defeat it. I mean, people aren't aware of this, but stealth technology actually begins back in World War II, and where you started developing materials you could put on a plane that were radar resistant. And then after the war, in the 50s and 60s, they really started figuring out we could really reduce the radar signature of a plane vastly But then there's a constant escalation of, okay, the opponent is doing this. How can we defeat it? And so we shouldn't assume that cloak technology is frozen at any one moment.
Right.
What they're doing is there are improvements in cloak technology all the time, but then there are new ways around those that are constantly being thought of all the time.
Right.
But as Uhura says, Spock points out at Impulse, it releases gas like anything else. Uhura says it's got to have a tailpipe.
Right. This is when we have Chang constantly quoting Shakespeare, and McCoy gives his line about "I'd pay real money to have that guy shut up." that like you said, that was a good line.
Yeah, he's just ranting over the phone,
and then
showing off how he can quote Shakespeare even in English.
Yeah, and then at the end, just before he dies, it's to be or not to be. Well, I guess not to be is the way it is. After they stop the attack, they beam down and they stop the assassin as he shoots. And Kirk,
also we should mention Sulu on the Excelsior is like racing to the Khitomer conference at the same time and shows up in time to assist the Enterprise in blowing up Chang's ship.
Right.
And Sulu does get a good line on the way there. He's like, faster, and the helmsman says, she'll fly apart. And he says, fly her apart then. Yeah. Which is a really cool line, but also, no, please really don't fly her apart.
Push her to the limit, though. I always love Sulu. By the way, this movie, we get the canonical, his first name is Hikaru, Sulu. Mm-hmm. So we get that in canon. And this is only the second time that Kirk's middle name is used, Tiberius. Yeah. The first time was in an animated episode.
Right. It was in, I believe, Bem by David Gerald.
Yeah.
And so because Roddenberry went back and forth on is the animated series canonical.
Yeah.
This
makes it definitive. Yeah. So, so in the epilogue of the movie, we have the Enterprise is being recalled to be decommissioned along with its crew. And they decide to take the long way home, and we get the line, second star to the right and straight on till morning, as they're...
From Peter Pan.
Which is... and then they literally fly off into the sunset, or at least into the sun.
Into a sun, yeah. Fortunately, they dematerialize before they smack into that sun.
Maybe you should go a little to the left of it, please. And that's where we end it. And it is the end of the original series crew together.
Era.
We will see the various characters show up again. Kirk, obviously, in Generations, which is the next movie, in the first TNG movie. Scotty shows up in TNG. Spock, of course, shows up multiple times. I don't think any of the others...
Spock shows up twice. He's mentioned more than that.
Well, after this, he shows up he's in the J.J. Abrams movie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then I forget where else.
He was in TNG twice.
Yeah, right. Although, I think that was before this movie, wasn't it?
I forget. It was, I believe... No, it was after.
Okay. So, in any case, this ends an era of Star Trek, which is, a pretty big deal. And then ends that era of this crew who, the actors had reached a point where I don't think they could keep doing this, and believably anyway.
They could have done... Well, they're already...
Picard
Mr. Scott would not have passed Starfleet physicals, but if you ignore things like that, they could have kept going. But I'm glad they went out on a high note instead of imagine if 5 had been the end.
Oh my gosh, that would have been horrible.
Wow. Yeah,
that would have been terrible. Yeah. All right. Anything left to say about this one, Jimmy?
A few minor notes. There was, if you watch in the dilithium mines at Rurapente, the prisoners are using beam tools with like lasers or something, or phasers or something to get at the dilithium. And it seems to me that's a really bad strategy.
Right.
If you have a bunch of convicts, you don't give them beam weapons.
Right.
Or they'll just have a prison break and turn on their guards, and then they'll turn off the magnetic field and so forth. So it let them swing picks or something, but don't give them ranged weapons.
Yep, that seems like a bad idea.
In the fight with Chang's ship, the Enterprise starts taking heavy damage, and we get to see and I like how with the three-dimensional combat, not all of it's not like they're just shooting at each other's, bow or stern. You have a torpedo bisect, one of Chang's photon torpedoes bisect the saucer section and blow up through it, destroying the officer's mess set that we had seen previously in the episode.
Right.
So I like I like that. And then in the final scene, after they've stopped, by the way, the final scene where we have, even though it's not known in the theatrical version, but it's Colonel West as the assassin, it's very reminiscent of the end of the movie, The Manchurian Candidate. And some other films too. But in the walk down from the climactic moment, they're talking about the end of history. And this was another phrase from the time where there was a historian, I want to say it was Samuel Huntington, but I may be misremembering that, who was talking about how since democracies tend not to fight other democracies, they tend not to go to war if it's a legitimate democracy, that as a result of the falling apart of the Soviet Union and the capitalist system proving superior to communism and the spread of democracy in the world, that we were, in a sense, approaching the end of history.
Yeah.
And he didn't mean that there would be no conflicts.
Right.
So he was kind of parodied as saying something he wasn't. He didn't mean that there would be no conflicts or no future wars, but that there wouldn't be the big, enormous, violent upheavals that had characterized the 20th century. And that you would and there wouldn't be like big shifts in history in the future, but just kind of playing around the edges, and we had effectively worked out an effective global governance system. And then 9/11 happened, and everyone made fun of him.
Yeah.
But that was the idea that we were reaching the end of history was something that was kind of in the zeitgeist at the time. And here they say, well, it may not. I don't think we've run out of history just yet, and that proved to be true in the real world too.
Right. Yeah, and I think it also, the subtext is there's still a lot of Star Trek possible, that they were planning to make more Star Trek. And after this movie, we still had at this point all we had was the original series in TNG, but after this movie we got DS9, Voyager, Enterprise, more movies, we got and then the newer stuff. I forgot to mention
at least one of the things you just named was good.
Yeah. Well, I forgot to mention Lower Decks. There is a Lower Decks episode called in their first season.
Two of the things you've named are good.
They had an episode called Veritas where they had a trial that was very reminiscent of the trial in this movie and was a lot of fun to watch. So if you haven't watched Lower Decks yet, do that and you'll enjoy it. But when you get to Veritas, you'll enjoy that especially. All right, I think that should do it. We've talked long enough about this. We do want to stop to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Star Trek, including Martin G., Robert S., Kelly G., Jacob S., and Mary W. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. And we'd also like to thank Victor Lambs, who edits the show for us every week. So that's it from us. We'd love to hear what you think of Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek, or our Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or send an email to trek@sqpn.com. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the Next Generation story, The Battle.
Yeah.
Until then, Jimmy Akin, thank you for joining me, sharing the secrets of Star Trek.
Thank you. Live long and prosper. Qapla' and Jolan True.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest. And remember, cry havoc and let's slip the dogs of war!